Well, look, welcome to Hogvillenet YouTube Live. I'm perplexed once again. Apparently, there's a setting now that I have to go and do in advance to make it horizontal. Used to, if I prop my phone up horizontally, once I started the live, it automatically did that. So this is the second time in a row I got caught with this. I thought it was a glitch the first time. You may have a shaky, jittery angle today just because I'm hand holding this. Was going to try to go an hour. Let's get right into it. This is my second installment of the State of the Hoop Hogs address. Had one a few weeks ago. And since that time, I've been to Arkansas Razorbacks open portion of practice that media got to go to last Thursday, September 28th. I did do kind of a brief YouTube report after that. But this is meant to be longer. We'll see how long I can go holding the phone up. I'll be switching hands as my arm gets tired here. But anyway, I want to thank you all. Whoever joined today, I appreciate that because after that practice, we know Arkansas had its red-white game. Only fans who attended at Barnhill Arena on Wednesday night, just a couple of days ago, were able to see the Hogs in person. The game was not live streamed or on television. They estimated the turnout to be 5,500. Eric Musselman, he made he sort of amended that and said he thought it was closer to 6,000. I guess he has a good eye for those things, but it was a good crowd and an excited crowd. I thought the energy level in there was really good from the fans. And of course, it's a red-white game, so everybody's a Razorback. There are no losing, there's no losers, even though they keep scoring. There's a red and a white game. And I thought this was an outstanding opportunity for media to see even more because we got that small window of practice. This was obviously a little bit more than just that. And you had game officials, you had fans. So anytime the lights are on, it's a little bit different than what you might see in some 5-on-5 scrimmaging in practice. But there are a lot of things to go through here. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about recruiting. We're going to get into some pro hogs because the NBA season, the preseason tips off this weekend. Actually, a game already played. You got a lot of pro hogs this time around. We're going to look at the rotation. We always talk rotations. I'm going to get into some of that. So I appreciate you joining me here at Hogvillenet YouTube Live. I want to thank a couple of my sponsors really quick. Parkway Automotive here in Little Rock, Fence Brokers Inc., also in Central Arkansas. Both have been outstanding sponsors for me. Most of my content that I put out at Hogville and then tweet or put out on X on that social media platform. So thanks to the sponsors. Well, let's get right into it. I think the biggest takeaway when I start going down the list, because of history, this is a different team. There are a lot of returnees, the most under Musselman. We've talked a lot of the talking points, a lot of experience, a lot of talent. I keep referring to positional versatility and diversity because there's a lot of depth at just about every position, 1 through 5, and then each guy brings a little something different. There's not like last year. It seemed like once Arkansas had a couple of injuries, they became a one-trick pony, and defenses were able to collapse. The spacing got ugly. The shooting was ugly. So we're going to get into all those talking points. But the first thing that sets all of that up is what's the best ability, is availability. That's sort of a cliche, but it's so true for this program. Even in year one, when Isaiah Joe went down with injury, Arkansas looked like a surefire NCAA tournament team, had a bagged string of games while he was out. That team just wasn't deep enough. Mason Jones, had the cape on. He was doing the Superman act, but it wasn't enough. Every year when you look at Arkansas when it hits rough patches, there's been injuries. Last year it was significant, 2 guys out. So I think when we looked at even the red-white game, who was missing? Well, we knew that Trevor Brazil wasn't going to participate. We knew that he was going to, and I'm going to someone's asked me for a battle update. I'm just about to talk about those 2 guys that didn't play in the red-white game. I just started it off talking about Trevor Brazil. Here's the deal on that. I think with Brazil, Musselman talked about it. We didn't see him go live 5-on-5 in practice. He did warm-ups, went through some of that at the start of the red-white game, but didn't play in it. We knew that would be the case. And Musselman continued to talk about his timeline. When he told us at practice 2.5 weeks, that gets him down to returning for 5-on-5 live scrimmaging right around the time Arkansas has that October 20 game to host Division II Texas Tyler. So, if Brazil's just getting back into that full 5-on-5 at that point, I don't know that we'll see him in that game. I can't completely rule it out, but I kind of doubt it. Right now, that could change. Musselman said he has been going through 3-on-3 live, just not full stuff. So not the 5-on-5. And Musselman also talked about they want to make sure that he's ready to go and there are no issues for the season opener. That's November 6th at home against Alcorn State. So you have another exhibition game against Purdue, a charity exhibition. That's a big-time matchup that won't count on October 28th. So I'm wondering, do we see Brazil again in this next this next game, exhibition game, or will they hold him until the regular season opener, or might they put him out there and go against that big man? Purdue's got an All-American, a guy that's going to be in the conversation for Player of the Year again in college basketball, in Edey, the 7-foot plus guy. They're not exactly the same kind of player, but you might want to see if he's ready to go and test against a quality opponent like that before the real season and the games count. We'll just see. We'll see how much bubble wrap Musselman decides to keep on him. And I think that's very, very important. Khalif Battle, who Arkansas had, we did get to see him in 5-on-5 scrimmaging Thursday. He's had injury issues. I know that some of that kept him out of the latter part of the July limited practice. The team took an 18-day break, came back. He was still held out of practice for a while, but he was back with the team and practicing by the time we got up there, and he was going through 5-on-5 live. He was in the warm-ups for the red-white game, and I noticed in the layup line or whatever drill they were working on, he started off okay and then he kind of hobbled a little bit and took himself off the floor, left. The team left for a while because they do that. They come out and warm up for a while, then they go back in and they come out. When everybody came back, Musselman talked about it after the red-white game and said that they, out of caution, because he'd practiced earlier that day as well, but out of caution, they did some x-rays, had doctors look at it over at the football facility right next door to Barnhill Arena, and that they didn't see any breaks. The initial reports are he hasn't, at that time, hadn't suffered any kind of injury that seemed like it could be chronic or that would keep him out an extended period of time. However, they didn't think they had the full picture. Musselman said, we're going to do more tests on Thursday, which was yesterday. Red-white game was Wednesday, and we have heard nothing official, nothing that's been released. Arkansas sometimes will put out information late on a Friday before the weekend. And I'm doing this YouTube live late on a Friday, so if anybody sees anything and it's legit, message me on here in your comments. But as of now, we don't have an update on Khalif Battle, so I'm trying to get that. And I might get it off the record and off the radar. So if I do that, obviously I won't be able to put it out until that's green lighted. But let's see if the university puts something out before the weekend or at some other time. All right. So 2 guys I'm talking about availability. I love this roster. I love the makeup of it. I love the talent. I love that positional diversity and versatility. I think it's Musselman's best. If you look at Musselman's demeanor when he talks about his team, where they're at, how far along they are, I don't know. I won't go as far as to say arrogant or cocky, but he seems confident. And Musselman's one of those guys that typically, if there's a problem area or if there are things that he's concerned about, he talks a lot about it, and not as much as that he's really talked about how he loves the fact that they've been able to stall more at this stage than they've ever been in terms of offense, defensive schemes, guys being ready, guys working hard collectively, all of that. He's talked a little bit on the negative side about the overall conditioning, things he wants to see improve there. But those are things I think they obviously can take care of. It's the middle stuff and the learning curves and all those things that sometimes you can't rush it, and they're not having to rush it. They're further ahead than they've ever been, and they've had some pretty darn good players with high floor IQs prior to this season. So here's where we're at with for me. Having said all that and how confident Musselman is, it still boils down to who do you have? Who's ready? Even when Brazil, he's on pace, man. They feel good about where he's at. They're not rushing it. But even when he gets back, and Musselman alluded to this a few days ago in his meeting with press after the practice that we were at, he said it may be a while before we see the Trevin that we're used to or that we think he can be, because you're not going to just jump back into competition. Your timing, speed of the game, all those things matter. Your confidence level on something like a knee injury, a lot of times it doesn't show up offensively because you're proactive and you know where you're going, you know where you want to move, whether you're on the ball or off of it. Defensively, you're reacting. You got a backpedal, you got a slide step, and you're changing direction based on what your reads are, what someone else is being proactive with their movement, who you're defending. So those things those are different dynamics. We got to see how that plays out. At fully healthy and fully back to the kind of game he can play, I have no doubt what Musselman said a year ago will apply again this year. He's a top 5 player in the SEC. He is just different on the front line. Arkansas had some nice pieces on the front line, but when he was out of the equation, it changed everything because other guys were kind of, you really couldn't count on the things you could with him from your front line. And sometimes Arkansas, the front line maybe caught some some expectations that maybe weren't realistic based on their skill sets and abilities. Not knocking those guys, but Trevor Brazile just brings a hold of him. He stretches the floor. He can shoot. He can put it on the deck and handle a little bit and create angles to get to shots out on the floor. He can finish well above the rim when fully healthy. He's a guy that can be a rim protector. He was kind of up and down in rebounding, but the games where the coaching staff had challenged him, he was a monster on the glass coming back. You want him to get to a point where they don't have to constantly challenge him after bad performances. Well, he's aged a year. He's maturing. So these are all things we need to see play out. But with Trevor Brazile, with what Arkansas has, not knowing, with a big question mark on Battle, where I'm going to talk a little bit more about him, I feel great about this team. Now, Battle, he's a guy, in addition to Brazile, who I've had projected when I've done my projections for top 7 or 8 rotation. But availability is one of the most important parts of ability on a team or a player. You got to play. Last season, he played the most games he's played in his college career. Parts of 4 seasons. Last year at Temple, 27 games. Led the Owls in scoring. Shot lights out from 3 when you combine that. And the 7 games he played the year before, where his numbers were really good, small sample size, but that's when he got hurt, injured his foot. So prior to that, a season before that, shortened season, he was at Temple. The year before that, he started out as a freshman at Butler and transferred. When you combine the 3 seasons prior to last year, 3 seasons he only played in 42 games. That's not a lot. 27 last year. And so far, so he's kind of got a history. So I'm not bagging on the guy. I'm not dogging him. I'm not blaming. What I'm saying is I'm looking at data. It doesn't mean that what happened then is going to dog him at Arkansas, but lately injuries have been dogging him. And we've got to see what his availability is. I think if he's available, he's a guy that could contend to be leading scorer at Arkansas. And the way we've seen 3-point shooting, not including him in open practice, and then the red-white game, it just makes it even deeper, an even deeper, more dangerous 3-point team where that floor is. I mean, you talk about spacing, it's going to be hard for defenses to contend, especially if Khalif Battle's ready to go. So when I go through some of my talking points and takeaways today, and I get back to rotation talk, there's going to be an asterisk by a couple of guys. One of them is going to be Khalif Battle just based on availability. All right, so we're kind of gone through some of the injury stuff. I want to get that out of the way early because I know that's top of mind for everybody. Okay, well, thank you for the compliment. Do you think Sam is gone after this season? That's a football question. I'm going to leave that up to the football guys. I did put a tweet out after the Texas A&M game the other day that I thought this Arkansas is probably nearing midway through the season now, probably in the conversation for bottom of the SEC. That's subjective, and there's a lot more football to be played. But if people talk about those things, and it is nearing midseason, after Arkansas and Ole Miss wrap things up tomorrow, you're at the midway point. You played half your season. So let's see what happens there. But I don't, based on what I'm hearing, and it's probably less likely unless there's just a complete, collapse. Not just not winning games, but other things. Some of those things have been rearing their heads. Turnovers, mistakes, penalties. And then we saw Arkansas clean up the penalties, but there's a lot of stuff to question, including the coaching. So we'll see what happens there. But I didn't want to spend time on football today. I appreciate the question, so I didn't want to ignore it either. Guys like Otis Kirk, Dudley Dawson, some of those guys are locked in more with the football team, are already talking about this stuff. But getting back to basketball, so we talked kind of about the negatives, the injuries, how that impacts things for 2 key guys. So we move on from that now because I want to talk about what has stood out to me in so many positive ways. Let's start with Arkansas's 3-point shooting. This has been just ugly. If 3-point shooting was falling out of a tree and it could be ugly by hitting branches, the old saying, you hit every branch, that's what happened in the last couple of years. And so you get almost reluctant to suggest that even looking on paper, guys bringing in that can shoot, it seems obvious they should be better, but you got to see it. And in that open practice, what we saw immediately when they got into 5-on-5 with Joseph Pinion and Jeremiah Davenport, 2 guys knocking, it was a dagger fest. They were going back and forth, trading blows from 3. And you're like, whoa, here we go. It might be okay. The red-white game just enhanced that thought. 14 of 28 combined between the 2 teams. 50%, but Pinion, 17 first half points. Davenport, all 19 of his in the first half. He had 11 points, was 3 of 4 from 3 in a blink of an eye. The white team jumped out to an 11-2 lead. That's how effective. It reminded me of Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe. in Musselman's first year. Those guys were efficient. They were volume guys, and you had to account for them. And a team that was undersized, didn't have a lot of depth. Before the Isaiah Joe injury, they'd had 2 or 3 losses, maybe. It started 3-1 in SEC play. That was the only good start in league play before that injury at Ole Miss. I was at that game and covered it when Isaiah Joe went for 30 plus and hurt it, but that was the game he hurt his knee. So it's not since then have we really seen even 2 guys now at 2 different events. Still preseason, we're not in the real thing, but I mean, there's no hesitation. There's no doubt. There's no lack of confidence. There's swagger in both of those guys. And I'm just talking about 2 guys. We can't count on everything we're seeing now as to being what it's going to be game in and game out. But we see the potential. And we've seen it twice now, not just once. I go back to Pinion last year as a true freshman. He is stronger. He's a lot more confident on that knee that he injured back in high school. I covered this kid. Unlike a lot of guys that talk about players, I actually talk about him because I know about him and I've seen him. Before he hurt his knee, his athleticism was a huge factor in what he was able to do outside of shooting, because he went after dudes and he went to the rim and he challenged people. And he was a better defender than what we've seen and what I saw after that when he got back and was always wearing a knee brace. And I could tell he wasn't the same. He was still an excellent player, and you wanted to see him get to that point. I think he's there. But what he showed us last year as a true freshman tells me that we've got more than just some preseason. It doesn't count. It's just, it's just practice. I mean, not 1 game, but 2 games in SEC play, this guy came in. He didn't have just 1 game and it's a fluke. You could make that case. 2 games where he came in and helped Arkansas win games. They were behind. He changed the whole dynamic for a team that couldn't shoot. Changed the whole thing, and they ended up turning those games around. Missouri and Ole Miss at home. Musselman talked about the Missouri game, but there were 2 games last year. And so I start putting this stuff together, and because Arkansas has so much talent on this roster, and they're so deep at each position, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, it doesn't mean that, okay, now I know for a fact that Joseph Pinion is going to be plugged into the top 7 or 8 rotation. But what I do know is I have confidence that if it comes down to that, he's going to be ready. He's not a perfect player yet. There's still things defensively. When I look at Jeremiah Davenport, this is a 5th-year guy. Over 205 threes made in his career at Cincinnati, shooting at around 35% clip. That's big time. This guy would have. There's 3 or 4 newcomers on this team that would have led Arkansas last year and made 3-pointers. Most of those guys shot at a higher clip than Arkansas's best 3-point shooters. But Joseph Pinion, by percentage, outside of those 2 games, even on the whole season by percentage and a smaller sample size, was Arkansas's efficiency leader. Trevor Brazile would have been second, but he had a small sample size. Devo Davis was the next guy in line who did play a full season other than 1 game. And we know he improved, and he shot 2 for 3 from 3. So I'm going to get into some more of that. But 3-point shooting is something now, when I look at this team, I've convinced myself that they're going to be better. I need to see more, but I've convinced myself to this point that they're going to be better. I need to see more to know how much better, but it's looking good so far. 7 Hogs hit threes in that 14 of 28 effort. It wasn't just Pinion and Davenport. Devo Davis, again, 2 of 3. Other guys made some threes. Some of the bigs, Bay Fall. They said he was towing the line. I guess they didn't count it. I thought it was a 3. Makai Mitchell was credited for his 3. Chandler Lawson hit a deep perimeter shot. I think they counted that as a 2, but it was close. He's a guy that percentage-wise, in a tiny sample size last year at Memphis, 50%. So he's a guy that's not going to take a lot, but when he does, he's confident. And Musselman's talked about him shooting well, Chandler Lawson from 3. So the 3-point shooting to me was the biggest talking point on the positive side coming out of this. Pinion and Davenport, because when I watch those guys in this red-white scrimmage and then the practice before, I go back to Mason Jones and Isaiah Joe. Just not a lot of wasted movement or over-dribbling or thinking or hesitation. They're confident. They get into the shot. That puts so much duress on a defense when they know you got guys like that they've got to run out, close out. Now those driving lanes open up. Cutters are getting free, going back door, different things. When you can pack it in and wait on everything, it makes it really tough, no matter how good your players are, no matter how many first-round picks you got. If everything they got to get is either getting it to the basket in traffic and maybe hope you get fouled and get to the line. And when Arkansas did that, they were a 69% free throw team last year. It's a lot of things for a team that still overcame injuries and some of their one-dimensionality and got to a Sweet 16. This team, to me, might be Musselman's best team. I've been saying that for a while. I'm not just popping up with that after a red-white game and everybody's feeling good. 88-70 after a 41 all tie at halftime. The red wins that game and blows it out. So the defense, Musselman talked about it. There are things that leave a lot to be desired on the defensive end. Just looking at that game, and Arkansas's hung its hat on defense. Every year it's kind of started there and everything else falls into place one way or another at some point. But defense is where they get things right to begin with. Top 10, then number 11 in the second Elite Eight season, and then 16, 17 last year, referring to KenPom.com. Efficiency ratings for defense. So I think Arkansas will be okay there. He talked a little about the transition defense he wasn't happy with. They want to get out and run, though. And so the offense, it's good to see that they did have some running opportunities off of turnovers, but also after made baskets or missed shots. And what I noticed is when you're talking transition, it's not always a layup or a dunk and getting ahead of everybody with a 3-on-1. Sometimes the defense is starting to get back. You got 3 or 4 guys back, maybe 5, but they're not all in position yet. They can't get turned around and figure out where everybody is. And what I thought Arkansas did a good job of in this red-white game, and I brought it up to Musselman in that post-game press conference, when even though Arkansas wasn't necessarily ahead in transition, when they crossed midcourt, one quick pass to left or right, and then the next pass to the corner or the wing, and the defense wasn't set yet. And now you don't have guys hesitating or trying to drive in with all that open space because they can't shoot a 3. Knocking down that open shot immediately, that's secondary fast break. That's secondary transition. That's part of your running game. That's part of what helps you get easier scores, more open looks than just having to slow it down and run a set every time. Because sometimes, no matter how good of a coach you are at drawing up plays, sometimes there's a breakdown. Sometimes it's just easier to get in that flow and getting guys used to playing a faster pace and beating the defense back. The defense should always be at a disadvantage if your offense is clicking and playing to your philosophies and what you're putting in. And doing it, and executing. And sometimes when you've got a more experienced team like Arkansas does now, guys that have played college basketball for years, they understand that a little bit better. Their timing's a little bit better. Yeah, they're still learning each other to some degree, but when you got veteran guys, some of that stuff looks good earlier. Again, a long way to go. Arkansas got a Division II team up next in an exhibition game. They've struggled in some of these exhibition games against D2. They had to pull one out a couple of years ago against Central University out of Oklahoma. I don't mean to be disrespectful. I don't remember. West Central, North Central, I don't remember. But Arkansas struggled a little bit there, had to come back and win that game late. Then Purdue obviously is going to be a challenge. Just like Texas on the road in exhibition play last year was, so will be Purdue, one of the top teams in the Big Ten, kind of been the best team in that league for a while, and certainly brings back a lot of players. They don't do well in postseason, but this ain't postseason. And so we'll see where Arkansas, how it matches up, how things stack up. It's a good barometer. So all this plays out in October. I like that Musselman moved up the red-white game, usually middle of October, midway, usually on a weekend, bumped it up, said he wanted to challenge these guys, something to look forward to. A lot of times with veteran guys, you want them, not only do you want them to handle themselves right, and they were experienced enough to know what's expected of them, but there still needs challenges, and they still need something in front of them to look forward to. So I agree with what he did there. I think that was great to do. So we've kind of gone through. We talked about the free throw shooting. I do think, or 3-point shooting. We'll talk about free throw shooting now. The red team was just over 72%. The white team 10 of 15, 66.7. 2 out of 3. Yeah, you put it all together. It's not much better than what Arkansas was last year, but I do think, because we saw everybody play and everybody at the line, or whoever got to the line with everybody playing. When the rotations tighten up a little bit, you're typically going to have your better shooters. When I look at this group, the biggest question mark there is your front line guys. They did not shoot well last year from the free throw line. Guys like Mekhi Mitchell, Jalen Graham in the 30%, Mitchell, I don't know, in the 60s, low 6, somewhere in the 60s. Those guys need to improve at least a little bit. Trevor Brazile, will see. Small sample size last year. I think he can be a decent free throw shooter, but we'll see. But with your guards, I don't have any concerns there. And Arkansas's guards last year, I thought were outside of obviously Ricky Council the fourth. I thought the guards didn't shoot well at the line. So when I looked at Arkansas's biggest problems last year, turnovers, free throw shooting, 3-point shooting, immediately I feel better about 3-point shooting and free throw shooting from what I've seen so far. Turnovers, the teams combined for 20. The red team only had 7, and the white team had 13. Again, when you drill down your rotation, they might get better there a little bit, but Musselman's talked about that as something he wants to see cleaned up. So I think it's been a problem. It's not just about having everybody playing on one night. I think there's some stuff there they're still working through. So those are some of the talking points. Defensively again, how much are you going to take from a red white game? I don't think we should be, worried too much right now because I think Musselman will get that figured out. He always seems to do it. Sometimes it's early in SEC play before they really dial it to where they want it. With a more veteran group, I think there's potential to get it done sooner. They'll be, like I said, there'll be guys like Trevor Brazil. It's going to take them a while to round out to who they really are as players. But you want him back healthy. That's the starting point there. You don't want to rush that. All right, I'm getting some comments. Penn did get blown by a few times in Davenport's turnovers. Davenport had 6. All fixable. Defense, this is Casey Hook. Thank you, Casey. Defense continues with the trend from years past, and this offense to be proved consistent. Look out. Anthony Kyle, how do, what Jalen Graham is doing this summer, do you think he can make all conference if he keeps going? I don't see Jalen Graham. He was all conference in the Pac-12 second team. I don't know that his role expands enough to be in that kind of conversation. So, he's a good offensive player in some ways. He did have 4 assists the other night. I was glad to see that because as good as he is, working inside that 15 feet in end range and using his pivots and spins, he gets a little tunnel vision. He holds on to the ball. He's not looking for an easier shot or a better shot. He's just looking to finish, and he's pretty good at it, but sometimes you want more from guys. You want more. Not only on the defensive end, that's been his bugaboo, is defense last year, being consistent there. He's kind of a tweener because he's kind of light. He's kind of light in the britches for a 6'10" guy. He's good athleticism. You saw him get pushed around by other bigs, more physical bigs in the SEC. Sometimes you thought, well, he can score a little bit. There's a little finesse game here. Maybe you can play him at the 4 along with Mackay. And I don't know that you'll see a lot of him at the 4. I think he and Mackay are 1-2 at the 5 spot. And I think, obviously Trevor Brazil, assuming he's back soon, is your 1 at the 4. He's a stretch 4. Man, he's something else. He is so special. I really think he's a first round talent, potentially a lottery pick. But then again, that's based on not only being at full health, but how does he respond to dealing with the challenges of having played really on that knee? How confident is he? How does he how quickly does he acclimate to speed of game and trust in everything? But outside of him, I think the guy that's emerged for me and next on that front line is Chandler Lawson, the transfer from Memphis, committed to Arkansas in late June. I was in New York City covering the draft and riding in an Uber when I got the news he was committing. So I tweeted it out from an Uber in Queens. But he's a guy that even then he didn't join the team for July. He didn't join until Arkansas got back from the break. He didn't start practicing until they got back in late August. And I've talked about this. I've talked at different platforms, maybe a Pig Trail Nation, I'm not sure. But I said, I think this is a guy that's going to have a real chance to carve out a role in that top 8. Because I looked at him statistically. He's efficient. He doesn't play above his means. He understands what he is. He's got 4 years in, 2 at Oregon, 2 at Memphis. And I look at that length and what he can do defensively. He's going to go in and battle for 50-50 balls, which we saw in the red-white game. He had a double-double, 13-10, and 2 blocks. But what he does is he gets deflections. He plays around the rim because of that length. He doesn't have to be a big leaper. He times it. He's really good at keeping the ball alive. And then offensively, whether it's stick backs, a little mid-range shot, he's got a nice shot. Like I said, I think he was 7 of 14 last year at Memphis from 3. Not a lot, but 50%. Musselman's bragged on his 3-point shooting in practice. And he stepped out. I thought he shot a 3. It was on the other side of the court for me. But I think they only credit him with the 2. But it was a deep 2. But Chandler Lawson just brings different things. I think he's in that top rotation for front line. And I kind of see it, him as a 3-4 combo. So I kind of see it as he and Brazil, kind of being your depth at the 4 and Mackay Mitchell and Graham being your depth at the 5. With Bay Fall, I'm going to talk about the freshman here. Let's do that now. This is a guy, he has gotten stronger and bigger. If you look at photos or you've watched him on YouTube or seen him in the McDonald's game, you could probably notice if you saw him, obviously if you weren't in the media, you didn't see him at practice, but the fans that saw him in person at Barnhill, and then you might have seen photos or video coming out of that red-white game. But I've seen this kid in person since he was in 9th grade at various grassroots events. And he was always rail thin, always rail thin, always rail thin. He's still thin, but he has added bulk in his upper body, especially, it shows. His legs too. I see it there. But he just has different stuff that he brings than anybody on the front line outside of maybe Brazil. But even Brazil, I think he's a little bit more. I think Fall is a little bit more comfortable battling around the basket, even though he's still adding strength and he's still got to work on some footwork stuff and other things. His ability to move in tight spaces and get out of his area to do things, finish a lob, block a shot. There's some of that with Brazil, but I think this guy even more. I understand why he's a McDonald's All-American. I really liked him. I mean, he scored in double figures in the red white game, knocked down a three. He did that in practice the other day. Musselman's talked about he's surprised him with his three-point shooting, but he's got a nice touch, and he's just, if he challenges a shot, he alters a shot if he doesn't block it. And then he goes and gets the rebound. In practice, he challenged a shot on one side of the lane. Shot was off, went over the rim or under the rim, but went to the other side. He tracked that down. Then he got off the ball quickly to get him moving in transition. Musselman says we want to run. They're doing a lot of different pro things in their half court as well, but some of that secondary transition, which I talked about earlier. But Fall's the kind of guy that can impact your running game in a positive way if he makes plays like that when you trust him to. So this is a guy that I think you're an injury away. We don't want to keep harping on that, or foul trouble away on that at that 5 spot from a guy like him getting minutes. So I think he's going to play, and I think he's going to factor in. I think the same thing about Layden Blocker. Layden did not practice the day that when we were in there, the media, for wisdom tooth extraction, but he was in the red-white game, played 28 minutes, 10 points, 5 assists. That was second to L. Ellis, who I'm about to brag on next. But he had 5 assists in that game, so he did a good job running things for the White. And I thought when I watched Layden Blocker, what I really liked about him was his burst and ability to get by the first defender. And then when the help came, he didn't try to over dribble or overthink it or force something. You guess who he was finding out on the perimeter? Jeremiah Davenport. Because when he's beating you off the dribble, Blocker, and help's coming, it moves everybody a little bit. Everybody's got to adjust. And so it's identifying quickly that guy, get me a good shot. Who are those guys? Who's on my team that I need to hit now that I've made a play and I got a numbers advantage? Who am I going to set up? I'm not going to throw it to someone who can't shoot if I can help it. And so that's what help. This is why it matters to have shooters, because it changes everything. You don't have to get everything off drives and hope you either get fouled or get some tough finish. Now you can make the game a little easier. And I thought Blocker did a great job of identifying some of these opportunities, especially with Davenport. A good number of those dimes. The first make of the game was a Blocker to Davenport 3. So I liked what I saw from Blocker. I think he's a guy too, in concert with L. Ellis, maybe some Devo Davis as a primary handler. He's going to get his opportunities. I like Layden Blocker. Tough kid. Got out in transition and just tattooed the rim. That's what he does at 6'2". He's fearless. He's going to challenge guys. But he's also going to play a team game. He's not looking to make it all about him. And he's a good rebounder at 6'2". He's a tough kid, very competitive. Love Layden Blocker. So this team is just, to me, loaded with options outside of the top 6, 7 rotation, 8, whatever Musselman ends up drilling it down to. And as the season progresses, the minutes kind of shrink for some guys at the back end of that rotation, but he's got more options to fill in anywhere in that rotation with competent guys. This is as good as he's had it, the way I see it. And you hope Battle gets back, as it makes him even better. That's a guy, to me, again, he's in an argument for a starting role, definitely a top 8 rotation guy if he's healthy. So we're going to talk rotation in more specifics. I'm kind of jumping around, but I could have led or been somewhere early at the top here with what L. Ellis showed me. This guy, he was a volume scorer at Louisville. He was a volume scorer at JUCO before he ever got there, led the nation in scoring. Louisville's leading scorer. These are bad Louisville teams. Awful last year. Arkansas destroyed him like everybody else out in Maui. But he also led that team in assists, 4.5 a game. That would have led the Hogs. I've talked about this. But what I like about L. Ellis is not only the veteran qualities, but when I've seen him now in practice where he didn't shoot a lot in the 5-on-5, he was setting guys up. I like that. If your lead guard is going to be your lead guard, you need to know he's going to do that. But in this red-white game, he took what the offense gave him, or what the defense gave him. And what I really liked is he was probing, looking to set guys up, game high 6 assists. So he did his job there. But he also 8 of 10 from the field for the 16 points, but he got in a variety of ways. One was a corner shot and secondary break. I thought it was a 3. They gave him a 2, so they didn't credit him with a 3. But he had, like, his second basket early in the game, the White had jumped out to a little bit of a lead. He drove to a point, got walled off. He didn't have an immediate outlet to pass to. The defense was doing its job. But instead of trying to force a bad shot into someone's reach, all he did was fade just a little bit. And so for guys that fade, that's probably not you'd like to get it going forward or make a pass if it's there, or maybe the defense is overplaying, you get a guy cutting. But none of that was available. All he did was fade a little bit. It turned it into about a 14-foot fadeaway, but it was nothing but net. And you could see the skill and craft just in that one play. This was not a bad fadeaway. For a lot of guys, a fadeaway is your last option. For a guy like him, I think he's got counters and different things going through his mind as a play's playing out. So I'm kind of talking a lot about one shot, but I was impressed with that. And guys like Jalen Barford, Mason Jones, some of these guys were good at driving to a spot. Maybe it's not the initial thing they want to do, but they had the confidence, the skill, and the savvy to take what the defense gave him, and he did that in that situation. So that wasn't a bad shot. Musselman didn't like the first shot of the game that he took. 8 in from the field, it's hard to argue throughout the decisions he made. We have to put the disclaimer out all the time, guys. This is one red-white game, one ultra intra-squad scrimmage. We saw a few 45 minutes of practice. Maybe half of that was 5-on-5, where we're seeing competitive stuff. We're not seeing what the coaches see every day. But I think El Ellis, I've said it from day one, he'll be the guy that gets the ball in his hands first at the lead guard spot. I think what we saw just in the red-white game backs up that notion. Here's a guy, to me, that is that combo guard. He can be a scorer. He could be in the running to be Arkansas's leading scorer. I don't know that I'd put him as the number one option there, or if I was putting a betting line on it, I'd probably have guys like Brazil in a healthy battle ahead of that. But Ellis maybe could be that guy. He also could be the guy, just like he did at Louisville, that leads Arkansas in assists. He was on a bad team. But I think with the pieces he has around him and the way that he was making reads and decisions he made in this red-white game, I have gained confidence now because I put my eyes on it. And I'm like, yeah, this guy not only gets it, but he was as big of a reason as probably Devo Davis of why the Red ended up going from a tied game at halftime to running out to a 20-point lead before winning by 18. And Devo Davis, now that we're on him, I'm going to talk about the defensive guys real quick. Devo Davis had a big second half, ended up scoring in double figures, but he had the 2 of 3 from 3, made his only free throw, had 3 assists, just does Devo things, but he was the leader in the game in box score plus 20 points, and he actually played 4 or 5 fewer minutes than some of the other guys, 24 minutes. But he's just a pest. His motor, Musselman says he's an energizer. He runs on batteries, and his motor, everybody raves about how, he just keeps working. We've seen it. We know what Devo is. We know he's been up and down with decision making. He got better as a 3-point shooter last year because his decision making on when and not only winning a possession to take him, but is he bouncing off the dribble and off balance, or is he going to set his feet and play it off ball movement? I thought he's just made a lot better decisions on what kind of threes he's going to take, and it's enhanced and improved his percentage, and then his volume went up as a result. And Musselman continues to talk about how pleased he is in practice when the choices he makes, shooting and all that. He only had 2 turnovers in 24 minutes. You're going to get some of that with Evo because of the way he plays. But this is one of Arkansas's heroes in postseason all time. He's one of the best players in program history. He may be the one and only guy to play 4 years under Musselman in college basketball, which is a big deal to me because, Musselman likes to turn that roster over. And Davis is a guy that has brought so much value that it's a positive. There are no negatives as to why he's back for a 4th year. And I think this guy's got a future in pro basketball. Could it be the NBA? We'll see. To me, if Trevor Brazil's the centerpiece of the team because of his pro potential, on top of that, some of that unicorn stuff he brings, I think Devo Davis, it's 1A and 1B, and we'll see which one ends up being the A and which one's being the B and the 1. But I think Devo Davis is right there in that discussion on what matters most for Arkansas and building around. Tremont Mark, the transfer from Houston, has a resume like Devo, and he didn't have a great offensive game. 3 of 9, 7 points, 6 or 7 points. He had a great play where Devo was just all up in his kitchen, just harassing him. It got a little physical. The refs didn't blow the whistle. And Mark just stayed calm. He didn't act out. He didn't make a face. He backed the ball out, hit the gas. Didn't fully blow by Devo, but he did a snow cone move where he got the ball up high and kind of glided through to the finish off the window, and it was really nice. But really, when you're talking about Mark, to me, he's a jack of all trades, a jack of many trades. He was getting deflections. He was jumping passing lanes. He was when guys would put the ball and look, kind of getting in the middle area and trying to turn left or right, he was coming against their weak side, against their blind side, against their vision, reaching in, trying to get a steal. That's the kind of stuff Devo does. And so now you got two of those guys out there just wreaking hell on people. Trayvon Mark's got great length. His length and body type reminds me of Jalen Tate, who was a plus defender. Should have been all SEC defensive team in that first Elite Eight team, which I think is Musselman's best team so far at Arkansas. I think this one might end up being better. But he has some of those qualities as Tate as far as size and length. Not the same kind of offensive player. But I love Tremont Mark. I think he and Devo immediately bring all SEC defensive chops to the table. And he's a guy that's going to make winning plays. In practice the other day, he had a chance. He had an open three to take. And instead, he just paused just enough to freeze the defense and kick out to Davenport, who stroked an NBA range three. But it was a smart play. You don't necessarily take every open shot if there's a better shot next to you. So guys like that who understand that, you're not necessarily looking at how many points they score at the end of the day. You're looking at a lot of things that impact winning, and he's one of those guys. Jalen Williams was like that in the front line. He just impacted winning in so many ways. You looked at the stat line, yeah, he became a double-double machine, 10, 12, 11 points usually, and then, 10 to 12 rebounds, whatever it was. But he was doing so many other things, taking charges, diving the floor for loose balls, all kinds of stuff to impact possessions. The more winning possessions you stack up, the better your chances are of winning games, especially when it's close. Tremont Mark is that kind of guy. He understands that, and he brings that value. I love it. So going through all these names, I've been talking top 7, top 8 rotation. We've talked some about the front line. Mitchell and Graham had their moments, both scored double figures, rebounded the ball okay in the red-white game. Some of their tendencies that I thought last year were areas they need to improve. I think they're still working on some of that. There'll be a work in progress. But again, Graham with the 4 assists. It's good to see Mekhi Mitchell back after missing all of June and July. They never publicly disclosed an injury, but he was in a walking boot. He didn't play in June or July. He got back, in when they got back to school. So, he looked pretty good given those things. We talked about just about everybody in the lineup. Denaje Harris, double-figure scorer, led this game with 5 steals. One of those he took coast to coast and flushed it. And I thought that was, it was good to see that this guy, as another veteran senior forward, I don't know that he's threatening for a top 8 rotation place. But again, there's so much depth 1 through 13 that if you get in a situation where you need to call on a guy, I think he's a guy that's going to be ready and give Arkansas something. Kamani Johnson was like that. They're not the exact same kind of player. Trey Wade, you could probably compare Lawson somewhat, not the exact same kind of player, but maybe the same kind of impact where you trust him. And you left out other than Keon Mayfield Jr., who showed us some good things. He's not available this year. We know that he's going to redshirt. So, when I go top 8 rotation right now for me, it's Brazil, it's Devo, it's Tremont Mark, it's L. Ellis. Those 4 right now with Battle out hurt, I'm going to put him in that top 7 or 8 for now. But so that's 5: Brazil, Devo, Tremont Mark, L. Ellis, and Cliff Battle. Then on top of those guys, I'm coming Mekhi Mitchell. Obviously, I think he's a starter at your 5. Then I've got Jalen Graham in there for now, and I think there's a great shot that he holds that down. So we're up to 7. And then I've got a combination of Davenport and Chandler kind of in that mix right now. Now, with Battles being a question mark, let's see what happens with that. He's not going. You can't have a guy in your top 8 rotation if he's not playing. He won't be, even if he would factor in at some point if he returns, someone's got to step up. And so right now, that's my initial. Those are my guys. I mentioned 7 names. I mentioned 2 more in Davenport and Chandler Lawson, who I see vying kind of for that 8 spot right now. But what's going on with Battle, anybody else that's hurt, that could become hurt, or if Trevor Brazil's a little slow, we just don't know some of those things. But those are the top 7 plus 2 vying for 8. And Joseph Pinion is knocking on the door. The only reason why I don't have him in that mix just yet is because Davenport's got more experience, so a little older player, even though he did have the 6 turnovers. But also defensively, I think Arkansas still wants Joseph to make some strides there. But I think he's awfully close. You could, if someone else said, no, I think Pinion should be in the top 8, I don't have an argument. I don't have a case against that's strong. If he's in that top 8, so be it. Let's roll with it. because I love Joseph Pinion. This guy to me, this to me, I mean, you had the 3 5-stars, the one and dones. You saw Joseph help Arkansas at times when they needed it. That's an NIT team if they don't win those games, maybe, you know. And so he helped Arkansas have success last year. Musselman mentioned him being on the court against Baylor on the road, you know, on a possession where Arkansas had gotten behind at the very end, not much time left. He's a quick trigger. He's a guy that can be an equalizer from 3. So there were times where they trusted him. So why not trust him more? So again, put him in that conversation. I think Blocker's right there because we got to see how LLS translates at the 1. We also need to see what happens with Battle. What adjustments does Musselman make at the 2, and how does he rotate guys around that to maximize defense, facilitating, and shooting, and some of the other things if a guy's out. But I think Blocker, even if Battle's healthy, he's going to have a chance to help himself here. And so that's, you know, so if you add up all the names, I gave you a top 7 plus 2 guys I think right now vying first for that 8th spot. And then I also mentioned after that Pinion, Blocker, and another, you know, I talked about Fall because the front line, even though they've got 6 deep, I think because he's a 5 and there's only 2 guys ahead of him, he obviously becomes a factor in your top rotation if anything happens to either Mackay or Graham, whether it's an injury, the coach is not pleased with some aspects of what they're doing, or foul trouble. So immediately, this is why I say there's so much talent and quality up and down this lineup that Musselman can kind of pick and choose. I don't think the core top guys are going to change without it being an injury, but I think I think Arkansas is better 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, probably than they've ever been under Musselman. And he's had some, let's remember, back-to-back Sweet 16s. 2 of those were Elite 8s. So to say that is a pretty big statement. I think when I look at this team, fully healthy, I see a Final Four kind of roster. I see a team, and I've been saying this for a while before I put eyes on them, that should be in conversations for preseason pick to win the SEC. At least, you know, when we'll see what the league does and when they go to media days and they do their voting, and we'll see if they put out the results of that. But, you know, if Arkansas is not in the top 3 of that, I'll be surprised. You know, A&M's going to be up there. We know Tennessee, Kentucky, these are some of the teams. Mississippi State is a team, I think there's 8 deep that could be vying for NCAA tournament. Tolu Smith, that's their guy, man. Their frontline guy. And he's given Arkansas problems in the past. He's got a foot injury. He's out. I tweeted out what Mississippi State put out, retweeted it with comments. He's out at least until SEC, sometime in SEC play. That's big. But going back to Arkansas, we see why injuries are important. It doesn't just impact Arkansas, but it's impacted Arkansas every year Musselman's been here, and they're going through some of that right now. And Trevor Brazile being the centerpiece of your unit, it still hasn't played in any kind of competitive stuff that we've seen yet. You know, there's question marks. So Arkansas at full health, guys being available, I see what to me looks like the makings of a Final Four kind of team. We know all kinds of stuff plays into getting to a Final Four. You know, matchups, draw, how do they, what bracket are you in? Some of these brackets are kind of lopsided sometimes. And some of the other ones are weaker. It seems like Arkansas has drawn the national champion 2 of the last 3 years and had to beat some number 1 seeds 2 years in a row. So they haven't had the greatest draws, but that's going to be the case for a lot of teams. And it sounds like excuse making, but on top of the injuries, and you just, if that's okay, there'll be other things that come into play as to whether or not you make a Final Four later in March. So far away, but guys that can play multiple positions, Ellis 1 or 2, blocker combo guard. Battle, even though he's really a 2, you could probably put the ball in his hands late in games like they did with different players over the years, kind of ISO them because they can do multiple things, either get off the ball for an open shot when defense have to contend with trying to stop the guy who's got the ball. So Battle might be a closer type. We don't know yet. We haven't really seen him much. But there's multiple guys that could play through. Trevor Brazile's a guy you might have the ball in his hands late in games because of his quickness away from the basket in 2-man game. And so whether you roll him, pop him, you might have the ball in his hands some to make something happen because you're going to trust this guy. So there's a lot of different things going on here. The wings, well, I look at Pinion and Davenport, and then I look at a guy like Chandler Lawson that can 3-4 combo. And then some of the other guards, some of the 2 guards. I mean, Devo can play the 3. He's had to defend that position. Trayman Mark's going to be a multiple perimeter defensive kind of guy, just like Devo. So there's so much versatility in all these guys. And now you've got shooting. Now you've got shooting, and you didn't have that. Again, I think there's question marks on defense just because an 88-70 game with all those three balls flying and some of the transition stuff, you leave that going, okay, we didn't exactly see the kind of defensive effort that we expect from a Musselman team. But I don't think that was part of what they were drilling down on as much on Wednesday in that red-white game. All right, so we've gone through the roster. I've talked about rotation. I'm just not ready to stick that 8th spot yet, just going back through it. I gave you the names. I'm not trying to waffle. I just think that's how good the competition is. And that's going to make everybody better, by the way, guys. It makes what could be a great team, just have those little intangibles that become tangible, that extra stuff. When you've got great competition and guys are worried about playing time, and a guy like Davenport that can knock down 5, 6 threes in a game, hell, Joseph Pinion can do that. I'm trying to beat him out. I'm trying to get those minutes. So all these guys, when you've got all this depth at each position, it just makes everybody better. The challenge is on. And so we went through that recruiting real quick. Arkansas picked up Isaiah Elohim, the 6'5" wing out of Sierra Canyon. Knew this was coming. You've now got the 2 players. I keep saying Arkansas is going to be a 2 or 3 player class in 2024. They were a 2-player class. The Hogs were last year with Blocker and Fall. And I really think now this could be it. I'm not saying it will be it. They've got another visitor that's scheduled as of now, Trey Johnson, maybe the best player in that class. Top 5, rated 5-star by everybody. 6'6" guard of the Dallas-Fort Worth area. He's at Link Academy this year with Jalen Shelley, who committed to Arkansas in September, the first one off the board, the 6'8" combo forward, also from Frisco, Texas, but now at Link for his senior year. So with Shelley and Elohim, I put out an analysis piece. I was covering the red-white game Wednesday night. It was late. I was still in Fayetteville getting stories out, getting video highlights out, and Elohim sends me a text. It was midnight, like 5 minutes before midnight, and said, hey, man, I'm committing tomorrow at 11. So I knew I figured Arkansas based on everything I was told. That solidified it because he's not going to reach out in California to a local media guy, unless it's going to be good news for the local guys here. So that's, he did. He made his commitment announcement on Thursday. That was just yesterday. And now Arkansas's got, to me, I love this kid's game. Physical player, strong, sizes dudes up, great craft, going left to right. He's got really good setup skill for his own scoring. Ricky Council was a guy like that. There are other guys before Mason Jones. You had Jalen Barford. You had guys that were strong setup guys that could do a lot of things, not just using quickness and skill, but then they've got the physicality to kind of finish plays off through contact or back guys off of him and bully him a little bit. He plays like that. So his mid-range is getting to the rim game. I love all of it. I love his craft. He's a opportunistic spot-up shooter from 3. He's still working on that. But he's got all the tools to fit in as this next guy in that 6'5" height and size range, playing the 2 or 3 that Musselman's had so much success since he's been at Arkansas. He could be that next guy. National top 35 rated guy. And, Shelley top 50. So you've got 2 top 50 players on board, and Shelley being that 3-4 combo. And you look at the trends with guys like Jordan Walsh just last year and other guys that have manned that small ball 4 spot, Trey Wade. There's been other guys, Umide and Tony, even though they were a little smaller, 6'5", 6'6", sometimes defensively they matched up with guards, but on offense, sometimes they were the 4, or they had to guard a 4 on defense at times. So, Arkansas's had success at that position as well with Musselman, not just 1s, 2s, and 3s strictly. And then we know Jalen Williams on the front line had a nice career under Musselman in 2 years before getting drafted. I think this is Arkansas's best front line under Musselman and could be one of their best front lines ever. And I compared it, historically in an article I did on the front line recently to the 93-94 championship team. I said, it's going to be hard to overcome and have the kind of impact that team did. But coming into it on paper and what I've seen guys, their capabilities, what they've been able to do, it could be this could challenge the backcourt as Arkansas's strongest position group. That normally doesn't happen in Arkansas. It's a proud history of putting guards and all league and NBA. There's been some frontline guys too, but vastly more guards. That's probably the case at a lot of places, but it's certainly been the case at Arkansas. And so to see the front line at this level of talent, depth, experience, all these things, It's different than most years. Of course, guys got to stay healthy, get all the way back. So there's still some question marks there. But again, when I look at Shelley, Jalen Shelley at that 6'7", 6'8", he's that tweener guy that'll be a small ball forward, Arkansas. And again, Elohim could be that next guy in the backcourt. And when I look at what Arkansas could be bringing back next year, some of the younger guys, Pinion, Blocker, Minifield, who'll have his first year as a Hog, Bay Fall. These two guys they've added kind of fit in there. There's not a bottleneck at any real position, at any one position where you're going, these guys could be on the court together. In other words, so you'll have a group of six that are still fairly young next year. And again, there's the transfer game, there's the portal. We'll see if guys that are younger that don't have opportunities this year, if it's not as much as they want, if they stick around. But if you do get those guys and assume they do come back, along with Shelley and Elohim, I like how it projects for Arkansas moving ahead. And so what's next? I mentioned Trey Johnson, the 5-star. October 20th is his official visit date to Arkansas. That's when the Hogs host Texas Tyler in that D2 exhibition game. And then the football Hogs are finally back home hosting Mississippi State on Saturday while he's on that visit, which could be a good thing for him to see, a game day atmosphere, see the fan energy. On the road for so long. I know the football season's not going in the direction people want right now, but that might be a game they could even win. I think Mississippi State's also sort of at the bottom of the pool in the SEC. So, but anyway, Trey Johnson. There's some other names out there that have been thrown around. Carter Knox, Jace Richardson, who took an unofficial last year. Some of these guys have pro ties to Musselman going back with their families. Amir Ali's another guy that's had recently put Arkansas's Final Five. And his dad talked about a definite visit in October. Still don't have a visit date on that. So we'll see. Sometimes when you start adding commitments, it changes what other people are doing. Arkansas, we talked about Passmore. For a minute, it looked like Arkansas was the leader. For a minute, they were at minimum in the top two. And then something changed pretty quickly, and Arkansas basically bowed out of that one. I didn't even report that the guy put Arkansas in his Final Four last Thursday, because that was, at that point, I knew that visit wasn't going to happen. And he ends up going to visit Texas. So I think today released a Final Three. So he dropped Arkansas. But, really the way I look at it, I think Arkansas moved on prior to however it's been, framed publicly and through social media. But that's okay. I think Elohim, I liked him. My preference, I like both of them. But there are things I like a little bit more about Elohim. Obviously, Honor Boateng, the Little Rock native, committed previously. He took his visit to Arkansas in July. Later visit to Missouri. That's where he committed to. Also liked him. I thought Boateng and Elohim were should be the top priorities for Arkansas at that 2-3 week. And then the athleticism that both bring, their size. There's some similarities there. They're not exactly the same player, but I thought they're similar enough that you don't feel bad not getting one if you get the other. And so you want to get in-state guys, but I think Elohim is a great fit. Just a very smart. I love interviewing him. I like talking to him. I like his swagger. I like his personality. And so you hope the best for him when he gets to Arkansas. So this could be it, though. This could be it for recruiting. These two guys, we'll see. You'd move heaven and earth to get Trey Johnson, as long as you end up behind bars doing it. So he's one of those guys you want to, NIL is going to play a big deal. And anytime you're a one and done projection, top 5, top 10, sometimes top 15 guy, it's a little bit different. Your recruiting's different. It's just different. Everybody's got eyes on you. Everybody wants you. The promises escalate. All kinds of stuff's going on. To get them on campus is a big deal. So if you do that, you got a shot. It's been a lot of talk for Baylor, Texas. Maybe that's what it is. We'll see. Alabama's supposed to get a visit. Who knows? But Arkansas, that's the one visit they do have scheduled right now. By the way, guys, before I went to the Red-White game on Wednesday talking about recruiting, a recent unofficial visitor from the class of 2026, Rogers High School in Northwest Arkansas, Aiden Chronister, a 6'6", 6'7" wing, had a really good spring and summer, had picked up, I think, an Ole Miss offer, but Arkansas, Musselman offered him 2 days after his unofficial visit back in mid-September. I got to go to his practice, see him in person, watch him practice before I went to the Red-White game. I tweeted out some of those highlights and an interview with him. He was later at the Red-White game that night to attend that, and I tweeted that out and got his comments about it. He loved it. But he was one of the 2 players that Arkansas had in for the Red-White game, recruiting prospects. Isaiah Seeley, who I absolutely love, class of 2025, national top 50 guy. He plays at Springdale, another Northwest Arkansas kid. 6'6", 6'7", lead guard, can play 1, 2, or 3. He's gotten stronger. He's gotten more confidence in using that frame to play with physicality, both on offense and defense. He's got a nice skill set. He's got a nice shot. He's a guy that I really think Arkansas in this next class, 2025, along with Terrion Burgess, who I got to see earlier in the week on Monday at practice at Benton, another top, 35, 50 player in that 2025 class, 6'9" combo forward. I think both of those guys should be Arkansas priorities. But seeing Seeley at the red-white game on Wednesday, he and Chronister were the two recruits that were there. So it was good to see him. But recruiting obviously never sleeps. 2024, Arkansas might be done, maybe not, but you've got to spread that wide net, cast it, and then you've got to stay on these guys. Get them to campus, go see them. And, Arkansas's been out to see these guys. They've been at least twice to see Burgess since September 9th when coaches could go back on the road. And so we just see, does anything happen sooner rather than later with some of these guys? Who wants to pull the trigger? I mean, we'll see if something happens sooner rather than later. But when I'm looking at in-state class 2025, are they good enough to be playing the SEC level? I think so. The next thing is Arkansas should have an advantage being in home state school. How bad do they want them? How much do they pursue them? So we always watch those things play out. So even though there's a sense of urgency to wrap up 2024, and we're really zeroed in on that, always pay attention to this other stuff because it's not just fluff. I mean, the fact that Chronister's going to take an unofficial visit to Missouri this weekend. Prior to visiting Arkansas, he was at Oklahoma. He's going to be a heavily pursued guy. So you just want to keep that contact. You want to keep getting him on campus when you can, get him to games, and just keep working it that way. I think Musman and his staff do a great job. And the whole staff recruits, not just one or two guys. So there's cross recruiting, which I think is also good. All right, so we've got through the recruiting Pro Hogs. We got a ton of them, man. The NBA's loaded with them. I report on the Pro Hogs every week through the season. And already this weekend, I think Saturday, we've got Golden State and the Lakers in a preseason game, Moses Moody. On Sunday, it's the Celtics and the Sixers. So you've got a potential Jordan Walsh, Ricky Council, the fourth matchup. Then on Monday, Oklahoma City's playing the Spurs, Jalen Williams, Isaiah Joe. And then on Tuesday, Nick Smith Jr. and Charlotte are playing the Miami Heat. And so you've got a multitude of Hogs. Daniel Gafford with the Wizards is going to be out 2 to 4 weeks with an elbow injury. We'll see if Bobby Portis plays preseason. He played with Team USA, and they had a busy schedule through the end of August, so he might get rest. We'll see if he plays. They've got Dame Lillard now, so there's some changes there. They lost Drew Holiday, got Dame Lillard, lost some others, so we'll see how much preseason he plays. But you got a lot of games, and I noticed most of these games are either on NBA TV or ESPN, and so look that up because these Pro Hogs, you should be able to watch them even if you don't have the league pass. But it gets started. So I know not everybody's a fan of the NBA. I love it, especially with the Pro Hogs and having such a presence right now with all these guys we're talking about. That markets your program. That helps sells what Eric Musman does. You want to know why Eric Musman's out at the Summer League every day? Why he was in New York City for the draft where 3 Hogs were drafted? It's because you have to sell your program constantly, and he knows how to do it. Don't sleep on the importance of the NBA for what Arkansas is doing now. Because the better these guys do, the more they represent. I mean, Anthony Black in Orlando, I left him out. They play on Tuesday as well. That one I didn't see a regular TV listing for regular cable, so you probably have to have the league pass to watch that one. But he makes his debut on Tuesday. So all these Pro Hogs are going to be in action, and some of them for the first time, and so that's going to be exciting. I really think Oklahoma City and the Thunder have a chance to take the next step after being just a dismal team for 2 or 3 straight years. And then last season, getting into the play-in, being 1 win away from making the playoffs. Isaiah Joe and Jalen Williams, big parts of their rotation last year, factored in hugely into what that team was able to do and put itself in a position. I think this year they're poised to take another step. Very young team, but a lot of talent. One of the top players in the game in the backcourt, a first team All-Pro last year, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I used to cover him in high school in grassroots. Got to see him play in multiple events, one in Mississippi one weekend when Gafford was there and put on a show, but so did Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So now you watch these guys as pros, you start kind of projecting them back then, and now you see what they're becoming. But you got a lot of Pro Hogs in the mix. I mean, Portis and Moses Moody have been part of NBA championship teams in 2 of the last 3 seasons. That's a big deal. That gives more shine to Arkansas. Anytime you're on good teams, also on these big game days, Christmas Day or some of the other days where the NBA really promotes the national television, where all fans can put eyes on it. When you're on good teams, you get to play in those on those stages, and so when you've got this many pro hogs right now, as many as 10 right now, you got a lot of opportunity not only to watch these guys, but to see them impact special things going on at the highest level. And that's always a big deal. All right. So we kind of went through everything. We talked about impressions after red, white, kind of projecting moving forward. We also talked about rotations. I'm not firm on 1 through 8. I'm pretty firm on 1 through 7 right now. One of those is a caveat with Battle and his injury situation. But if I'm assuming health. So just for the projection, for the sake of that. So when I do that on that 8 spot, again, I'm back down to Davenport and Chandler Lawson with guys like Pinion, Blocker, and even Fall to some degree because of how depth works on the front line, especially at the 5. All of those guys are knocking at the door. All of those guys are going to get opportunities. And I do think Arkansas has got its best shot right now under Musman in year 5. That's saying a lot. On paper, coming into it, this is his best team, I think. So hopefully they stay healthy. Hopefully we get to really see all of it come together. But this team's got a chance to run deep in the NCAA tournament if they stay healthy. I think they're going to probably have their best start in SEC play since year 1 before injury set in. And I think they're going to have a chance to compete for an SEC title, which they haven't done yet under Musman. They finished second, won 11 straight SEC games to finish league play, then won their opener in the SEC tournament to win 12 straight total against SEC competition. But that team still only finished second, a game and a half back of Alabama that year. Alabama got off to a great Arkansas 2-4 out of the gates. But I think this team has got a legit chance to start better, win the SEC. I think if you have a season like that when you're playing teams like Duke at home, you've got that another outstanding field in another tournament out of the country in the battle for Atlantis and the Bahamas. But you've got non-conference. I think it's their toughest. I think the SEC is obviously challenging and tough. When you put all that together, I think they've got a chance, if they do what I think they can in SEC play, to have even improve on seeding relative certainly to last year, but maybe even be better than the 3 that they got 3 years ago. Maybe they can even improve on that. So those things also help your fortunes in postseason and maybe going a little extra, maybe getting to that final week and in that Final Four. It's been so long. This is a proud and storied program. Arkansas Final Four bound a lot started with Eddie Sutton and then Nolan Richardson after that, 3 and 6 year span. It's been a while. You got to go back to the 90s. I lived through it. I was there. I was an adult and covering sports and covering the Razorbacks when that stuff was going on. I've got a perspective from that has been it's been a drought and a desert travel up until Musman got here overall. And so these are times that remind me of back then. It's exciting. If you don't want to talk basketball right now in Arkansas Razorback basketball, you're missing out. And if you're locked in, man, it could be taking it further than it's been going back to the 90s. I think there's a shot at that this season. I think, maybe it wasn't realistic to expect that in these previous teams because they had some deficiencies, not only in the roster, but certain parts of the skill sets. I don't think they have those deficiencies anymore. Not now. There'll probably be some we see that play out that maybe we question it some, but right now I feel good about it. So we'll see. I'm not trying to pump myself up. I'm not trying to pump you up. I'm trying to level this how I see it. So if it seems homer or over the top, I'll be judged based on results. I know that. So until next time, we're an hour and 10 minutes in. I think this is the longest I've gone on one of these. I appreciate you being with me. I got to some of the comments. Passmore and dollar signs from Lance Walker. Well, you might not be wrong about that, sir. You might not be wrong about that. All right, guys, until next time, I'm glad to be with you, guys and gals. Appreciate all of you. I did, I think, okay holding the phone with my hand this whole time. We'll try to get it figured out next time so I can put it back on the tripod. Until next time, thank you for joining me on Hogvillenet YouTube Live.